The Duke of Edinburgh arrived at Williamtown just after 4 o'clock on an Air Force VIP flight from Dubbo. It's the biggest parade ever staged at RAF Base Williamtown, and it's unlikely to be surpassed in future years as Australia's mainland defence facilities move further north. On parade, more than 500 troops representing 75, 76 and 77 squadrons and No. 2 Operational Conversion Unit. All four groups were formed 50 years ago in 1942 as Australia prepared for the Japanese onslaught. Each of the squadrons saw active service in New Guinea and the Pacific, fighting decisive actions, often with great sacrifice. Nowadays, the squadrons are still flying frontline fighters, the F-18 Hornets. 76 and 77 squadrons and 2 OCU are still based at Williamtown. 75 Squadron is now based at Tyndall in the Northern Territory, but returned to share this historic occasion. Hundreds of guests witnessed the parade, including Newcastle's community leaders and about 700 Air Force veterans and their families, for whom the occasion had special significance.
Yeah, I think it was, touch in parts, Yeah.
What did you think of the parade itself?
Oh, terrific, tremendous. Best parade I think I've seen, really,
And the Duke paid a small but significant tribute to the ex-servicemen and women who'd waited patiently to meet him, extending his itinerary to allow extra time for informal talks with the veterans. So, after weeks of rehearsals, the parade appears to have gone off without a hitch. It's also a great relief to the officers and troops involved that the inclement weather held off throughout the parade. With the official performance out of the way, it's expected that informal celebrations will continue well after the march. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
Right from the outset, the BHP breakers pushed forward and Meredith combined well with Brad Maloney. Maloney shot finally over the top. Marconi replied briefly. David Lowe's header well saved by Mike Gibson. Namoff was proving a handful on the right and he was unlucky not to open the scoring. The breakers did get the ball in the back of the net in the first half. Maloney jumped on the loose ball, but the referee ruled Koch had caused interference to Mark Swarzer. As the first half came to an end, Lowe nearly put the visitors in front, but the woodwork got in the way and it was 0-0 at the break. 5 minutes into the second half, success for the breakers. Koska's long ball falling for Koch, who made the necessary space, onto Maloney, and he did the rest. Newmoff again was devastating. His ball to Koch a beauty, but the breakers' up-front man couldn't add the finishing touches. Moments later, Koch had another real chance, scaring the paint off the right-hand side of the goal. Marconi haven't been the NSL champion for years by giving in. Gibson forced to make a great save. But the breakers rallied to hold out the Sydney Siders. Final score, BHP Breakers 1, Marconi 0.
For generations, people in Lambton have learnt their love of books in this small weatherboard building. But while the library has a rich past, its future is uncertain. Newcastle City Council has already considered closing the facility altogether, and next week it will debate whether to shut the library doors each Wednesday. And that's made the Lambton folk angry. At the protest meeting outside the library, Alderman Tate heard the residents' fears that Lambton is a dying community.
If this library closes, even for a day a week, or even if it doesn't close and they reduce the book stocks and the range of books, it is slowly dying, and that's what people are reacting about.
The residents have vowed to take their fight to City Hall, arguing that the aldermen shouldn't even consider winding down their service, only a week after approving huge pay rises for Council's senior officers. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
Larson is the captain of the Australian team and was in brilliant form after resuming on 44. She quickly raced into the 80s and the partnership blossomed. But on 82 nearly fell to a sensational catch by Plymmer. Larson made her highest test score of 86, and it's finished on 148 not out, and Australia declared it 4 for 346, giving Australia an overall lead of 200.
Keep going, buddy. Stand clear. Good go, mate. Come on, people, wait, please. There you go. Come on.
The heavy skies hanging over the Lower Hunter today told a sorry tale to farmers praying for sunshine. Still drying out from the floods 2 weeks ago, those on the land in the Morpeth and Phoenix Park area woke this morning to see water surging from the Hunter River and over farms. Drivers on the Hinton Road would have been better off on floats rather than wheels. And these Morpeth factories along the river had to contend with the water literally lapping at their back doorsteps. The river at Maitland's Belmore Bridge peaked at 7.85 metres this morning. Although upstream at Singleton, 49 millimetres fell overnight, the water levels have been dropping since this morning. The Hunter's not the only river swollen by the rain. Wallumbye Brook has been closing roads as causeways and bridges turn into watercourses. The State Emergency Service says the Wallumbye to Singleton Road is still closed at Williams Bridge. Cessnock City Council claims many of its roads have been severely damaged, particularly Richmond Vale and Tuckers Lane.
We're not quite certain of the amount of damage as yet because there's still water all over the road, but we're expecting a very, very high damage bill.
But good news for farmers and motorists. The rain is expected to give way to the sun once again tomorrow. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
The battle for Stockton Beach began 20 years ago. Conservationists fought sand miners' plans to strip and extract mineral sands from the dunes. These days they're fighting a rearguard action against the companies over the replanting of mined land.
But don't try to tell me that you're God and you're going to change, put it back to nature.
Representatives of Mineral Deposits Limited, a BHP subsidiary, met residents concerned about limited native vegetation regrowth on a 30-hectare site off Cox's Lane near Williamtown. The dunes were mined in 1985 and have been under regeneration for the past 4 years. It can take from 10 to 25 years for the vegetation to grow back. The Department of Mineral Resources is the watchdog that approves and polices mining operations.
There's been no breaches in the conditions.
Don McNair, a botanist, has studied the area for decades and says where there was once an abundant variety of plants, mining has left a bleak legacy.
They haven't answered my question about when they finish and how many species there will be when they finish. In other words, we're going to end up with a botanical desert here.
What's this about legacy? We're talking about a young ecosystem here. You know, I'm an ecologist. We're looking at developing that ecosystem back, and we're looking at the company probably getting out their responsibilities in 25 years' time.
Conservationists and residents want to see the area designated a coastal reserve, highlighting both natural and man-made features, such as World War II fortifications and the wreck of the Cygna.
The area is expanding rapidly, and I think this should be held out as a recreation area from Fern Bay to Nelson Bay.
An all too familiar scene for emergency services, just 1 kilometre north of the notorious Ewingsdale intersection near Byron Bay. Police are still trying to identify the driver of this station wagon, which slammed head-on into a semi-trailer. It's thought he may have been a 31-year-old Swiss tourist. Rescue crews had to cut away the roof to free his body. 2 people in the semi escaped without injury. The highway was blocked for more than 4 hours. And salvage crews are still clearing up after a semi-trailer overturned north of Bulladila. The driver, 54-year-old George Bell from Londonderry, died instantly when his rig careered off the road. The load of PVC pipes scattered through the scrub. One southbound lane is still closed. There are some minor traffic delays.
One of Dr Smythe's first duties today as the permanent boss of the Health Service was to inspect the earthquake damage to the Newcastle City Morgue. Dr Smythe was given the job of administrator by Health Minister Phillips last August, when it was discovered the area's budget was hemorrhaging at an unacceptable rate. Since then, it's been said that Dr Smythe is the pharmacist filling the minister's prescription.
That's an interesting description. No, my appointment as administrator was to sort out a mess, and now with my appointment as Chief Executive Officer, I've now got the opportunity to carry that through and to ensure that the people of the Hunter get the health service that they deserve.
So after 8 months in his hands, how is the patient faring?
The patient, the health service is alive and well, needs a little bit more blood sugar raising and a little bit more jungle juice to really get it going, but it'll be up out of bed and going back home hale and hearty fairly soon.
Dr Smythe says he will deliver to the people of the Hunter the best health service in the country. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Pitt Street in Taree could be described as a bird lover's paradise, but according to the neighbouring Australian Cooperative Foods milk factory, it's more a health risk.
These bird roosts in their tens of thousands of an evening, their droppings could possibly be transported into the factory and or residents' homes, and we're very concerned about that.
The controversy grew when it was suggested the old trees be cut down to get rid of the starlings. Environmentalists were angry, saying the trees were too precious to be destroyed. In the end, there was a compromise.
There were some investigations undertaken and was found that by lopping the trees and applying a chemical to the limbs, it would deter the starlings from roosting in the trees.
It's not sure where the birds will go if they are forced to fly the coop, hopefully somewhere outside the Taree industrial area.
To most of us, working underground would be like being in another world. For 6,000 coal miners in the Hunter Valley, it's a job. But according to Newcastle University researchers Rod Wetzel and Richard Brown, working in an environment without sunshine could be playing havoc with miners and shift workers' body clocks.
When we start playing around with light, we start playing with our body rhythms, because this sets our clock, our biological clock, and we get mood disorders.
Mr. Wetzel believes the out-of-time body clock also makes a person feel jet-lagged.
It's like jumping on a plane and flying 7 hours across 7 time zones, and they get that jet lag occurrence. But they're doing it every week. They're doing it every day, week after week after week.
Those who spend their lives at the coalface agree with the findings.
You're coming to work in the dark, you're going home in the dark, you never get to see the daylight until the weekends, and then come weekend you're sort of basically not real sure where to sleep. I felt pretty run down,
The researchers believe the mix-up of night and day might not only affect workers' immune systems, making them more vulnerable to sickness, but also their job performance.
These can relate through to accident rates, stuff like that, lack of awareness on the job.
Rod Wetzel and Richard Brown are calling for volunteers so they can continue their research into what happens when the hands fall off the body clock. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
In the state's troubled healthcare industry, Maitland Hospital had every reason to advertise its achievements in lights. While community leaders and senior staff paid tribute to the hospital's long record of healthcare, they also raised questions about its future. Planned extensions and upgrading of theatre facilities have been put off time and again as the hospital waits for the government to allocate funding estimated at $36 million. While senior hospital staff remain confident of eventually receiving the funding which was first promised under the previous Labor government, they do admit that the 150th anniversary is an occasion to reflect on how frustrating the delays have been.
I guess there is a sense of frustration, but we're always ever hopeful that very, very shortly we will be given the OK to go ahead with it.
Member for Maitland Peter Blackmore, who threatened to cross the floor if his government reneged on the funding, is still convinced the money will come.
The Premier and the Minister for Health have announced that this hospital will be redeveloped in this term of government. Our term of government is going to 1995. I'm very confident that we will have the hospital redeveloped in that time.
Mr Blackmore dismissed out of hand opposition claims that the government was planning to privatise the hospital.
Maitland is simply redevelopment. It is not a knockdown and rebuilding a new hospital. So therefore it would not be applicable here.
The hospital did receive one important and hard-earned birthday present. The health service has given the hospital a full accreditation certificate, the equivalent of a 5-star rating for healthcare. It's the only hospital in the Hunter to receive full accreditation for all facilities, including community health services. Tom Hilston, NBN News. The 22-year-old man from Sydney and a 29-year-old from Adamstown Heights were arrested this morning as they waited in this car behind the Cardiff branch of the Greater Newcastle Building Society.
They have both been interviewed and charged with conspiracy to commit armed robbery upon that building society earlier today. Knives and other items were found in the car at the time of their arrest, which tie them into this particular offence.
The Adamstown Heights man has also been charged with the armed robbery of the Adamstown branch of the Greater Newcastle Building Society last Saturday. Meanwhile, in an unrelated incident at Maitland, members of the drug squad and local detectives confiscated almost a dozen firearms and a large quantity of amphetamines and cannabis resin during a raid on an isolated property at Gilliston Heights. Police say they're concerned by significant rises in hard drug abuse in the Hunter, and they'll continue a series of operations aimed at traffickers. A 47-year-old Gilliston Heights man has been charged with firearm and drug offences. He was granted conditional bail to appear in Maitland Local Court next month. Tom Hilston, NBN News. The cannabis crop, with an estimated street value of more than $300,000, is being held at Tari Police Station awaiting destruction. The operation, codenamed Full Dope, is the latest in a series of drug seizures around the state, targeting the bigger organised growers.
The plantation was divided into 3 plots, which was situated along a creek. They appear as though they've been there for some time and they've just reached fruition.
Police say the discovery wasn't directly linked to last week's Operation Noah drug phone-in. No arrests were made during the raid and police inquiries are continuing. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
Bruce Hodge is one of a team of specialists which maintains the 2,500 personal computers used at Newcastle University. Computer viruses are becoming increasingly common. Some cause the letters to fall to the bottom of the screen. Others send unprogrammed messages to the user. But in the last 10 months, a much more sinister virus has been unleashed on the computer world. It's called Michelangelo, and it will become active on the artist's birthday. If your computer is infected with the Michelangelo virus and you don't know it's there, you will on the 6th of March. Bruce Hodge says within 60 seconds of turning on your computer that day, all the information stored in it will be wiped. Any IBM-compatible computer could be affected.
The only way to determine it really is to get some antivirus software and check your machine.
The Michelangelo virus was first detected in the Netherlands, but those responsible for creating it have not been found. Why would they have done it?
We don't know. It's the same mentality as people who walk down the street and break car aerials off.
BHP is taking the threat seriously. There are about 700 IBM-compatible personal computers in use at its Newcastle plant. After screening 150 computers for the virus, they've found 4 cases of Michelangelo. Once the virus is found, another software program can be used to destroy it. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The warning at the head of every hired home video movie is such a familiar sight to viewers that it rarely sinks in. But Newcastle police demonstrated the warning has teeth when they arrested a 29-year-old Islington man on video piracy charges. Police confiscated a collection of more than 90 videos, many with original covers from the legitimate tapes. It's alleged the man borrowed videos from this outlet at the junction, dubbed them onto his own tapes and returned the original. Others were swapped, the poor quality copy being returned instead of the original. Video store proprietors say the problem is widespread, but they will take legal action every chance they get.
The music people protect their industry and the video industry does the same because it's big business.
Video piracy has become so prolific that the video distributors now have their own private security firm to detect offenders and report them to police. Police say that many people don't realise that making their own copies of hired videos for private use is still an offence, punishable by heavy fines and the destruction of the videotapes involved. If somebody has a private collection, will police act on that?
Not if they're handed in, they would be forfeited, and that would be the end of it. But if we find out about it, yes, action would be taken against these people.
In the meantime, the national video distributors are saying enough is enough, and their private security firm will continue to track down the pirates. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
Hello everyone. Very happy birthday for 103. Happy birthday.
Come right down low. 3 and do it. Where you go? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Jack.
A symptom of Howard Smith Limited's performance, the company flagship up for sale. The shipping division recorded a drop of more than 7%, reflecting tight trading conditions. In the absence of long-term charter prospects, the 40,000-tonne Australian flag coal carrier is now on the market, expected to fetch anything between $10 and $12 million if a buyer can be found. In contrast to most other Howard Smith operations, its subsidiary Guninans traded satisfactorily with an improvement over the corresponding previous period. The delivery of Tangara trains and a new contract with Victorian Public Transport worth $56 million helped the Railway Products division. A company report says dividend income was well down following the disposal of shareholdings in Newcastle Coal Loaders, now Port Waratah Coal Services, Coal and Allied and the Adelaide Steamship Company. The report concludes that no improvement in earnings is expected in the current half year. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
After a local flower supplier discovered land in the Tari area was being purchased for growing orchids to export, a steering committee was formed to create their own enterprise. An overseas market for Australian orchids is apparent, with America, Europe and Japan being the biggest buyers.
The Japanese are currently buying some of the bigger orchid nurseries and running them here themselves and exporting the flowers from Australia. And we feel that we should be doing this too.
The grower co-op, if approved by the local people, will benefit small landowners growing both flowers and herbs. It's hoped the co-op will be a money spinner and local land and products will be utilised.
It's going to take a lot of doing. There's a lot of groundwork to be done, and orchids are long term, they're not really a short term thing. The other side of it, the herbs and things, will give cash flow, but hopefully the thing will all fall into line.
A public meeting to establish the cooperative will be held next week.
"500 children living near the Pasminco-owned lead smelter in Port Pirie have been tested by the team over the last several years. Peter Baghurst of the CSIRO's Human Nutritional Division says the study found a large difference between the IQs of children who had higher lead levels in their blood than those who had lower levels. Mr Baghurst says that while lead may not have as great an effect on a child's IQ as other factors, such as the intelligence level of parents, it is still significant. The team's findings challenge previous theories that lead exposure merely delays intellectual development and that affected children can catch up as they get older. According to the study, thousands of children may be suffering mild intellectual impairment from lead dust caused by mining and smelting operations, or from lead-based paints, or from leaded petrol. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
I just wanted to see her, just to come and see me. I don't have any visitors.
Frances Wrightson is used to being alone. She knits, she crochets. Painstaking hours of work, her best pieces bundled up to give to her granddaughter Robin. She has no photos. The 15-year-old she remembers is now a mother herself. That much she does know. But Frances is certain Robin is still in Newcastle.
Well, I'd just like her to come and see me. Just want to see her.
Thoughts of a reunion spark a smile, a scene she's obviously played out in her mind 100 times.
Just put my arms around her, I guess, and be glad I found her.
It must seem a long way from the British Isles and the heady heights achieved in winning the World Cup, but there are worse places than the beautiful coastline of Terrigal to return to football. David Campese made the trip from Italy for the event. Willie Offengower looked pensive as he nursed an injured thumb, while Steve Tyneman was his usual relaxed self as he and his Wallaby teammates responded to the adulation of starry-eyed youngsters. Up for grabs, places on the plane for Hong Kong.
I think the last few years have been pretty disappointing up there, so today gives a good opportunity for the best players around the country to get together and show your wares so that you get the right team picked.
At Horseshoe Beach this morning, the novice Newcastle triathlon for those who are thinking about taking up the sport seriously. And not a bad way to start. Just a gentle 500-metre swim in the harbour, followed by a leisurely 24-kilometre bike ride around the city, and to fully work up a thirst, a little jog of 6Ks to finish off. Among the learners and first-timers, a couple of seasoned triathletes, and it was one from this group that stormed home to win. Peter Murray took 63 minutes to complete the course, just in front of Mick Jerd and Nicholas Brunette, while Anne-Marie Lawrence was the first lady home from Wendy Scott and Sue Robertson. The triathletes raised $4,000 for the Life Education Centre.
What better way to see the lake? It was a welcome treat for the Mayor and the General Manager of Round Rock, Texas, who spent a week touring the region, investigating trade potential and local government practices. They're keen to import some of the Hunter's good oil, that is, its wines, but they also had a few suggestions for the pressing issue of waste disposal, recycling and the privatised handling of garbage. From matters of garbage to crewing a racing yacht to booked tickets for the night's game, the visitors will take home a good impression.
The championships are part of the Inverell show. More than 100 shearers entered the competition, hopeful that they would be judged Australia's best. But it was Ian Elkins from Boorowa who proved he's capable of more than a fair day's work. He clipped wool at a rate of 200 sheep per day, judged the most skilled in the fine wool shearing championships. He was presented with this valuable trophy, a silver set of shears inlaid with sapphires.
It's fantastic. This is the best trophy I've ever won in my life.
Once every 2 years, the Apple and Grape Festival is held in the tiny Queensland town of Stanthorpe. Normally, the population is about 4,500, but it swelled to 75,000 for the festival. Organisers of Armidale's first autumn festival were keen to learn from Stanthorpe's success.
We've got to keep the procession rolling. If there was any criticism, that's one that I probably should make, although it was beautifully done by the same token. Keep the procession going, and of course if we can get a few more floats at the late stage, it all makes a lot of fun for the children.
The Armidale Festival will be launched at the city's town hall by Mayor Alderman Rosemary Leach on Wednesday. Organisers are confident about the future of the festival.
I think we can make it equally as good as this one with a lot of hard work.
These trees were planted 4 years ago. Recently, volunteers returned to the Malpas Dam for a 2-day planting session.
Absolutely amazing, yeah. Planted 5,000 trees yesterday afternoon. It was just incredible. To one moment there was nothing and the next moment it was full of trees.
David Curtis, the regional organiser of Greening Australia, has enlisted manpower from schools and community groups.
It's a long sort of term hope that we might eventually revegetate the foreshore right around Malpas Dam one day.
Funding for the project came from the Armidale City Council and the Greening Australia organisation.